Hello, learners. Today I'm going to discuss the essay Postcoloniality and the Artifice of History. Who Speaks for Indian Pasts by Dipesh Chakrabarty. So I have prepared a PPT and I will be presenting the central argument posed by Dipesh Chakrabarty. So, first of all, Chakrabarty is actually problematizing the representation of history, the idea of history, the notion of history that academia in all over the world or across nations they deal with. So he is problematizing the representation of Indian history and also the concept of history, and he is questioning the narrative forms and structures of Indian history. And second point he makes is that Europe has been continued to look up to as a fountainhead, as a source of all theoretical knowledge, of all historical knowledge. A sense of history is given by Europe. So Europe continues to be a silent referent for the third world nations, and which leads to the subalternity of their history, which leads to the subalternity of Indian history as well. So he is actually challenging this notion that Europe can't be a producer, a source of all theoretical knowledge. And he also gives a solution to this problem. He feels that if historians, if representation of history is representation of European history, or the European philosophy, European theories are provincialized, the concept of nationalism given by Europe, if it is provincialized, that is, provincializing of Europe, can actually decentralize the dominance of European history on, on the world. So now let's problematize the representation of Indian history or history in academia. From henceforth, the discussion will be focusing on Indian history and a sense of history. So, India and Europe as hyper-real terms has been posed by Dipesh Chakrabarty in his essay. He he opines that Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality can be seen in relation with European dominance of discourse over Indian history. So India as a nation started to model, started to aspire to become a nation by looking up to, by admiring European principles of society, European principles of a nation. So it's more like a representation of the represented. It's like a copy of the represent many representations. So India, as following or trying to imbibe European concept of nationalism, can be seen in hyper-real terms. This is a picture which I generated from using GPT. So it's up to you to uh, critique it, or to pose a subjective argument towards it. Now, when India and Europe are seen in hyper-real terms, it seems that India will always be in a position of the subordinate, because Europe keeps on, keeps on being the center of Indian history. So it is like Europe and India are always paired in opposite terms. India is always looked as a subordinate, And European history is always a silent referent. It is working always as a, you know, um, as a point of comparison with Indian history. And Europe has continued to be the scene of, or to be a point where modernism, where modernity, or where society, civilization, development, capitalism, all these concepts emerged. So Europe continues, whenever we look at Indian history, we look at it through European concepts. Okay, so now says, then he goes on to say that, Indian history is at a position of subalternity. And why so? So I have given this slide the title, Symptoms of the Subalternity of Non-Western Third World Histories. So he lists two symptoms third world historians feel a need to refer to work in European history. If they do, tags of old-fashioned or outdated emerge. So, the whole presentation of history has to do with the alignment of European history. We tend to revisit European history. On the contrary, European historians or Europe do not, does not do this. They do not reciprocate to Indian history in the same way as we do. Now, Chakrabarty gives an example of this symptom. He says that in his, in his essay, he gives example of Edmund Husserl's lecture in Vienna. And Edmund Husserl had given two concepts. Greek European science he posed as he deliberated it as theoria, or giving absolute theoretical insights, and Oriental philosophies only as a source of practical universe. So when it becomes practical knowledge, it is related to the action of doing, action of experiencing. On the contrary, Greek European science is always, you know, grounded in theories, grounded in proofs. But Oriental philosophies are not grounded in proofs. They have to be experienced. Oriental history have to be experienced. And from here, when it comes, the concept of experiencing truth, experiencing reality, and there is no base of proof in Oriental philosophies, and Europe tend to give the idea of mythical, attach the idea of mythical religious to Oriental philosophies and history. Then he also gives another example that, Karl Marx used these concepts of coined these concepts of bourgeois, capitalism, capitalist society. And any society that existed before that is coined as pre-bourgeois and pre-capital. So whenever we are looking at Indian history, we are also tending to look at a society, a time period which existed before the bourgeois, before the capitalist economy. So again, we are aligning, we are accruing to European history. We are again looking up to European standards. Then he continues to say that, there is incomplete history, and the incompleteness in Indian history, he feels that, in regard to nationalism, started from the foundation of Indian National Congress in 1885 and continued to 1947. And European history had, had given or had mentioned this time as greatest time of transition in history, in Indian history. But this transition history remains incomplete. And why is it incomplete? Why is there a lacuna? So one example again he gives, that the dream, Gandhian dream of Ram Rajya was incomplete. or the leftists' social revolutions, the dream of having complete social revolution through transformation and social reforms, or a complete capitalist society remained incomplete. But why it remained incomplete? So, first of all, these transition narratives for third world histories have three major concepts according to the contemporary Indian history or European history, or the if we say that Indian history's hyper reality of Europe, these three concepts are majorly prevalent, and that is development, modernity, and capitalism. Whenever we are writing Indian history, we focus on these three sense of histories: how India received its development, how it became modern, and capitalist society, how it turned into a capitalist society. And these three concepts were, where they are located in Indian history through European philosophy or through European theories. So now, as I asked this question, why there is an absence, why there is a failure, why there is a gap in the transition narratives of Indian history from 1885 to 1947. So what, Dipesh Chakrabarty is saying that we have not studied that if Indians why Indians did not turn into complete bourgeois, why they failed to turn into a complete bourgeois society, and also, what kind of challenges it faced, the bourgeois society, which was very much instigated by European nationalism. Then why did the Indians not transform into a complete bourgeois society? So here remains the gap from 1885 to 1947. India was trying to model itself to under the dreams and aspirations given or fed by European concept of nationalism. But then they did not turn into European bourgeois society, and this failure is mostly ascribed to the workers or the peasants, because they remained uneducated, and they could not be removed, they could not be awakened from their ignorance and parochialism, they could not be awakened from their false consciousness. That is what we assume. We always give the burden of this failure to the peasants and to the workers. Now, when going back to the historical um, time from 1830s to 1840s, or to 19 till 1947. So as India was continuing to arrange itself, organize itself according to European concepts of nationalism, the idea of nation state had to be made legal. And Indians aspired to become a modern individual, which Dipesh Chakrabarty is saying that can be related to the phenomenon of colonial pastiche or mimicry given by Homi Bhabha. So modern individuals started to adopt Western ideals and philosophies, so much so that the forms of representation, the forms of, literature, or the forms of narration started to be adopted by the Indians, whether it is through the genres of novel, the biography, the autobiography, and even the way of narrating history. And to narrate history again, Indians and European historians looked only at a section of Indian history. That is how modern industries came in, how technologies came in, how modern medicines came in. So Indian history mostly focused on how it became modern because of the contributions made by Europe. Now, the Indian bourgeois during colonial period, as we were talking about, the bourgeois society of India, that why it failed to transform completely or to model itself entirely as a European nation. So first of all, let's go back that how the bourgeois operated in an Indian system back then before independence. So Chakrabarty says that the bourgeois individual is not born until one discovers the pleasures of privacy through a deferred public. So the bourgeois private and a modern individual man is private as well as public. He chooses a different set of public. He will not have any target audience. He will be very selective. He will have a specific audience. He will be performing for a specific set of people. So he is modern, private, and yet public. He is the Bhadralok, or the respectable man who, you know, who has a clean house, who has a house in the fashion of a European family, who is an aspiring Bengali Hindu middle class. Okay, back then, Europe's dominance was a lot in Bengal, so that's why the mention of Bengal, especially Calcutta. So he is the, subject of Victorian domesticity. And these Bhadralok, or these respectable men, wanted to reform their women, wanted to modernize their women, and they followed a system of discipline and order in the domestic space, and they wanted their wives to become friends. So they started to emulate the European concepts of modernism. Now, the modern political structures rested upon the state, the civil society, and the bourgeois family. So these, the nation state, how a nation should be organized, the laws and the principles, the civil society, the ethics of a nation, and then the bourgeois family comes here to make India a modern nation, a modern state. Now, why complete bourgeois transformation was not possible? The Indians challenged and modified these received ideas in such a way as to put in question two fundamental tenets. What is that? They challenged, they could not, adjust with the concept of a nuclear family, because Indians at that time had extended family. Okay, based on companionate marriage, they could not adapt to the concept of a nuclear family. And also, they could not have a secular historical construction of time, because India has so much of religious and cultural diversity. Having a secular notion of time was not possible. Okay, and also because India has been under several rulers, parts and shreds of cultures. Okay, now, the sacred and the secular and the sacred. So, India as a nation, started to emerge as a secular nation as well as sacred. So now, the bourgeois domesticity was governed by freedom, equality, and awakening. Freedom in choosing the government, equality, okay, social equality, caste equality, social reforms, and awakening. So these, awakening from, from a past which was bind in traditions, which was bind in superstitions. So again, by having these concepts of modernity, they wanted their women to be tamed. They wanted their women to obey and also also be free. Then this concept of the modern housewife in India, who were not like European housewives, but but were full of Indian values, Indian traditions. The concept of Bharat Lakshmi attached to the idea of ideal Indian women started to be propagated. Then why again a complete transformation of India as a bourgeois society failed? Because of collective memory. Because of collective memory, collective memory is not particular to European nationalism. Collective memory is not a a process, a sustained process that happened to Europe and that has happened to India as well. The formation of collective memory, the constitution of collective memory is different in India. So it is, in a way, anti-historical. And why is it anti-historical? Because history is majorly represented by the Europeans. And that's why collective memory becomes anti-historical, as it did not conform to the Western mode of history. And why is it anti-modern? Because in the, within the phenomenon of forming a collective memory, Indians kept going back to the past. Indians kept, selecting the traditions, the cultures that represent Indians as diverse yet secular. So they have, Indians have. India as a nation, India as a nation, because of the collective memory, started to conjoin selective modernity. They were selecting shreds and patches of cultures, and with this I am referring to Bhabha's theory of arbitrary selection of shreds and patches from Indian past, and they, in a way, started to selectively participate in modernity. They did not want to become completely modern, and they did not want to move away from all the traditions and customs and model themselves as a complete, true European nations. Now, a sense of history, and there is some typing error. I have typed this is twice, so kindly ignore. So, in a way, Dipesh Chakrabarty is actually then questioning our sense of history. He is saying that what should be the role of historians. Now, historians should remember that history is fraught with struggles and violence, lapses and gaps and omissions. And this is a crucial role of historians to remember these omissions, to know these omissions, to acknowledge these omissions. They shouldn't be going back, revisiting European past, European concepts to represent Indian pasts. So, he goes on to develop this argument that history in Indian academia or outside, it is actually based on universal truths. And who represents these universal truths? Those who win at the power struggle, those who take over of the narration. So there is this politics of organization and reiteration or representation. So in the modes of teaching, we need to change. We need to look into our modes of teaching, the politics of teaching, the recruitment process, the promotions of European history, publications of past, of history, even our understanding of economics as a discipline, history as a discipline, is a result of European imperialism in the contemporary times. So, this is our sense of history, which needs to be changed. Then, Bhava, I'm sorry, Dipesh Chakrabarty is also saying that how India should be articulating its history. Now, India has two sections, the modern elite and yet to be modernized peasantry. And unfortunately, we still have these categorization. Now, within these categorization, and there is a meta narrative. There is a narrative which celebrates the nation state, which celebrates the formation of a nation state, which celebrates the structures, the pattern of a nation state. For example, a nation is sovereign and limited. So this sovereignty and this limitation is celebrated, is acknowledged, recognized. This is the meta narrative which keeps emerging again and again. And when we keep on focusing only on these meta narratives, we again indulge into mimetic representation of Indian pasts, of a narrative which is not complete, which is again based on European concepts, European history, which is again based on um, you know, European discourse of history. So in this, in the history of transition narratives, Indians are always posed or represented as failures. Indians are always represented as failures to become bourgeois society, but no one questions that why this failure happened, because it is important to know why, so that we can decentralize the dominance of European discourse. Because once we know why, we tend to understand that nationalism in India developed differently. And we need to focus on a past which is left out, which is not given attention. Okay, next slide. So next slide is about why the transition narratives remain incomplete. So it remains incomplete because, Indian history is modeled after Europe's narrative, and colonialism created internal division based on class. So that's why, when we think of Indian history, we only tend to look into the concepts of capitalism, modernity, and development. But we are not looking at the episodes of rejecting development, or the processes, the struggles that several Indians made to, to think differently. So the shadow of Europe needs to be discarded, it needs to be overthrown. Now, again, if we don't focus on the gaps, on the lapses of Indian history, we will again lead to the, we will be making our history as subaltern. We will remain at the position of subalternity. So Dipesh Chakrabarty then comes with this solution of provincializing Europe. So if we provincialize Europe, we say that modernity was not just for Europeans. Modernity was also for Indians. We need to challenge the notion of modernity in fixed terms given by Europe. We need to challenge that modernity did not necessarily mean coming of industrialization, development. When we provincialize Europe, provincializing means more localizing. So European history cannot be read in terms of universal truths. European history should be read in terms of Europe's locality, Europe's local culture, Europe's local histories, local geographies, local specificities. So, it will then gradually, take us away from the position of subalternity. Now, why provincialize Europe? As I mentioned, it it is high time that we keep our focus, particularly not on European history or what were the contributions of Europe towards Indian development. We have to look into, uh, you know, the history which was ignored. We have to recognize that European history is not universal. And, usually this has happened for so long because Europe always had been winning in the power struggle. And those who win in the power struggle, they tend to represent their history, their version of narration as universal truths. They themselves as, theoretical, um, theoretically grounded or um, you know, um, theoretical basis, but which is not true. Now, again, provincializing Europe means that Indian history has also an equal space. Europe, European history is not superior, but it is just different from Indian history, from Indian concept of nationalism. This slide you can read. This is also adding to the point that provincializing Europe doesn't mean it is a call for cultural relativism or for atavistic or nativist history. It is not, a project of talking about how culture is relative or culture is always shifting or changing. It is a project to be looking into history from heterogeneous perspective. It is required so that every nation can be looked as radically heterogeneous, free to write over the narration of past, the narration at present, writing over the dominant discourse of Europe, and free from nightmare of tradition that modernity creates. So we always tend to look into Indian history from the point of view how modernity came to India, how modern it was, how India changed, how India became civilized. And we also tend to focus on the traditions, because we again tend to map the modernity in terms of traditions. So instead of these fixed, rigid categories of tradition and modernity, history needs to be rewritten. History needs to be again, talked about like a discourse which is free from all, rigid boundaries and rigid theories and rigid notions, whether given by Europe or any other country, you know, third world, any other first world nation, which is exercising its imperial rule from a distance. So that's all. I hope it is understandable now. Thank you so much.